Hello, and welcome to the LA Venture Podcast. This is Minnie Ingersoll, host of the podcast and partner at 10110. 10110 is a seed stage fund here in LA. All opinions expressed on this show by me and my guests are solely our own. If you are interested in LA Venture, go to 10110.net/podcast, where I've made a sortable list of all of the great LA VCs who've been on this show. Katelyn Foley is with me today in Venice. Katelyn is the president at UP.Labs, a venture lab that builds SaaS companies in partnership with large corporations. Katelyn has launched 15 businesses over the past 8 years. Prior to joining the founding of UP.Labs, Katelyn was a partner at BCG Digital Ventures.
Hi, Minnie. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Been really interesting learning your background and what you're doing.
Yes, we're having a blast over at UP.Labs. So we have a hangar at Santa Monica Airport because we are transforming the moving world.
Yeah. And I had Ben on the show, but so that's UP Partners, right?
That's right.
But this whole thing of you're just creating businesses, 15 businesses in 8 years.
Yes, I was at the Boston Consulting Group's Digital Ventures. That's where I got my start. I was there for almost 8 years as a partner by the end. And we worked with corporations in BCG's pipeline, and we started new companies with them. And so some recent ones that I launched were Spin by OXXO. If you know OXXO convenience stores down in Mexico, that's a fintech that I had the pleasure of launching.
Wait, what does Spin do?
So Spin is like a Venmo for OXXO. So OXXO has, I believe it's 18,000 convenience stores, which is absolutely nuts. Bigger footprint
I know,
than
it's like the OXXO,
yes,
right?
Anyone who's been to Mexico knows this. So bigger than Starbucks by footprint. And we launched a Venmo-like service so that you can transfer cash, but do that digitally between locations, which is really needed in that market.
And so that was you were more like a founder than a consultant.
Correct. That was the division I was in at BCG. So all of us acted like founders of these companies, but we worked synergistically with the consulting side.
That's so cool. But you're a founder of a company that now is all over Mexico.
That's right. Yes. I had a lot of fun working in emerging markets. I actually worked in Malaysia for several years and launched a company called Settle there, which allows folks to pay for fuel with their mobile phones. And they've got 10% of the country transacting on that per month now, which is crazy for a fintech that's so young. So that's gone really well too.
And are you the founder? Who's the CEO? How does that work?
Yes. I would call us a founding team. So I worked with teams of product managers and engineers and designers. And, I've always said you can tell what each group at BCG is doing by the titles of the people involved. And Digital Ventures was just that. It was all product managers, engineers, designers. And so we would have a founding team that would come in and essentially come up with the idea, sometimes completely blue sky. In partnership with a corporation, we would get that approved by the corporate leadership, and then we would build the thing and launch it and actually do all the user testing and then ultimately hire the full-time team.
And is that the same or different than what you're doing at UP.Labs?
There are some commonalities. There are, and there are some pretty significant changes. So, the biggest change to our model is that we really spent time aligning the incentive structure. I'm really proud that every single person who's an FTE at our company has equity. That was really, really important to me. And not only in what they build, but also in a portfolio. So we're kind of bringing founder economics and portfolio economics together for our team.
Okay, so you're working with these corporations, and what is the value or what is the trade-off between if they just did this themselves or if they did a CVC?
It's very hard for them to do it themselves. And we often work with CVCs. So to me, there's a few different things that corporations can do in innovation. One, they can have R&D, right? That's important. That's critical. It's really required at the end of the day. But it's very long-term, and it's cash intensive, and it's people intensive too. They can also have their own accelerator or incubator. Those have had really limited success. It's hard for them to attract talent with the right incentive structure. So that's what we're bringing to the table, which is different than what they can do. So with a public company, they're not going to be able to offer someone equity in a new business. It doesn't work that way. And in many cases, they don't have the technology know-how to bring to the table to actually bring to bear a new company that's viable. And then you have CVC activity, like you mentioned.
Wait, I want to ask about each of
yes.
these.
Yeah.
Let me start with R&D. So with R&D, you said it's long-term. Why is this different than what the R&D is doing? Is this shorter term?
It's shorter term. So we actually have, with the corporations we work with, a call option. So we're on a 4-year cycle. In the first year, we come up with the idea. from many strategic challenges that the corporation faces. And that's also what's different between us and, say, Digital Ventures, is we completely focus on strategic challenges inside the core. So we're not looking for growth. We think that's a really difficult way for a company to make money. Porsche is not a private equity company. The VW Group makes $1 billion every day and a half. And so us coming in and starting a unicorn is really not that exciting to them. It's going to take a lot of time. It will distract them from what they do well. We focus instead on the problems inside the corporation. Problems that don't have a startup that's tackling them, where they can't contract with that startup, and also that are things that are too difficult or they don't have the talent to solve internally.
Okay, but just say it again slower for me. So you aren't focused necessarily on their growth.
Correct. Yes.
You're not building a unicorn.
Yeah. I mean, it's not to say that we wouldn't build a unicorn. I would love to build a unicorn. However, our model is really focused on these reliable hits. So we have sort of limited upside and downside in some ways. So we work with a corporation to build 6 businesses over 3 years, 2 businesses per year. And really a perfect portfolio to us looks like 6 $100 million businesses that get acquired by the corporation.
So do they have a call option on buying the company in 4 years? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah. So the way the cycle works is it's a 4-year cycle. And in that first year, my team goes in and, kind of like consultants would do in the very beginning, we look for challenges inside the business. We go ideate. We come up with prototypes and proofs of concept. We test those using live data from the corporation. This is actually quite cool. We get access to crazy amounts of data. So for Porsche, we had access to live Taycan data within 12 months of working together, which is kind of insane. And the reason why Porsche did that for us is, just as you said, at year 4, or at the end of this 4-year cycle, Porsche can acquire that company from us. And so they're really comfortable sharing data and information with us that they wouldn't normally share with another startup company.
But you were looking to have customers who aren't just Porsche.
That's right. And so we want to invest in things that are only viable in the broader market. And that's important to Up Partners, who is our strategic partner and venture fund, when they seed this business. And so anything that is just focused on Porsche and can't go into the broader automotive industry is not interesting to us, because if that's the case, they should pay Accenture or BCG fees to go do digital transformation work, because that's essentially what that would be.
And so did you just say, do you think digital transformation work is not good work for a startup to be doing?
In my opinion, that should be fee for service, because there's not a return that you're getting in the future. And that's where I think some of the consulting firms have come in and sort of blended these models. And I think it should be a little bit more black and white. So to me, if you're doing early stage growth, it's not suitable for fees. It's suitable for aligned incentives, because you really need to push through those first few years. They're hard years. And you can't get people to do that with a fee for service model. Now in digital transformation, it's a lot more, executive types, people who have worked in big corporations that can come in, affect change very quickly, get fees for that, move on, do it again. That's the repeatable model there. And it's really, both are very powerful tools. They're just for different uses.
Okay, I'm rewinding a bit. Why did you say incubation doesn't work within the companies? Because you said they couldn't attract the talent? Was that
Yes.
why? And because the equity is wrong?
That's right. It's very hard for public companies and large corporations to attract the talent that they need. And actually, we were having a conversation with the Porsche executive board recently, and they said, we attract the very best automotive designers in the world. Who wouldn't want to work at Porsche in that space? But when it comes to software specifically, it's harder for them to attract that talent, because they have big tech and they have startups and they have other incentive models.
I know I'm jumping a little bit, but how do you attract that talent? You've sourced, I think you said 4 CEOs? No.
That's exactly right. Yes, we're really proud of that. So there's a few different types of talent that we're working with. So one are the full-time employees of UP.Labs. So that's my team. So it's a lot of folks that love 0 to 1. This is their passion. They love to do it over and over again. As a matter of fact, they might not want to go scale the business. And so that's one type of talent. And those are the folks where I said every person who walks into our door who's a full-time employee has equity in every single startup that we build. And there's a structured liquidity event within, 3 to 4 years of their joining where they could see a return. The second type of talent is the folks at the portfolio companies. And so these folks are incentivized a little bit differently. So they're coming in and the idea is there. So there's some level of product customer fit on its way to product market fit. There's funding from Up Partners. There's a first customer contract from Porsche or the airline that we're working with or the retailer that we're working with. And then there's a structured liquidity event for that person. And they're getting cash compensation, but also pretty significant equity.
And tell me about that 0 to 1 sort of stuff. Like, what is I don't know if it's a playbook, but like, what are some of the best practices you talk about when getting these things going?
This is a lot of fun. And this is a lot of our secret sauce. And we did learn.
Tell me the secret sauce.
Yes, we learned quite a bit from our time at BCG Digital Ventures. We do a lot of mapping in the beginning. It's friction mapping, it's value chains, it's org structures, it's functional mapping, and really understand, what does this business do? Where's the profit? Where's the value pools? Because we won't pursue anything that isn't at the confluence of high value and high friction. And to me, high friction means that some human is experiencing a bad problem. And it could be somewhat infrequent, but if it's a very bad problem, I'm still interested. So we've had this debate. We just started working with an airline. We kicked off in San Carlos this week. So I was there all week. And we had this interesting debate about the baggage experience. And we were saying, actually, it might not be as big a value pool as, say, maintenance or operations of aircraft. But people never forget when an airline loses their bag.
100%.
And everybody has a story about this. So it's a very high pain space. We'll have conversations at the executive level, and they know where there are challenges, but they don't necessarily know why. And it's the people who are doing the day job who might have been in baggage handling for 20 years that actually know what the problems are and just haven't had a chance to articulate those to anyone outside of our team. And we can go in and sort of connect with these people and map out those workflows. And it's a lot of paper prototyping. I think a lot of the paradigm of what we do are B2B SaaS, data science, and AI companies. And so a lot of this is running experiments and seeing where we can collect data and where we can start to develop stronger insights than what they have today.
Yeah, so tell me, keep going on what that looks like. So what is a paper prototype?
It is literally a Figma prototype, or even sometimes a sketch on paper where we show someone, here's what your new workflow could look like, or here's some screens.
Okay, but I sometimes feel like you get mixed messages when you say, this is what your workflow could be. And people are like, that sounds great. And then you build it and they're like, oh, no, it's not really.
It's a good debate, because I would say in digital transformation, there's more workflow change that you want. And actually in SaaS, you don't necessarily want a ton of workflow change. You want to augment decisions that are already happening. And so I can give you an example with Pole Systems. The concept there was that Porsche has a very challenging time predicting when a battery is going to fail. And so, that's problematic because the automotive industry has made a beautiful transition into EVs. Honestly, it's staggering. It's really the biggest product pivot of all time, and it's been relatively smooth. So for many automotive companies, they took, existing models and just added batteries to those. Porsche launched the Taycan, incredibly successful vehicle. What's been harder for them is the software and support services around those to make the customer experience really rich and to support their own teams, everything from supply chain to design. And so
because it's gone from a hardware maintenance to a software,
that's exactly right. Overnight, pretty much. And a lot of the calories were spent on how do we even launch this brand new hardware that requires a new way of thinking. And Porsche is one of the best internal combustion engine companies in the world. So it's actually phenomenal that they did this. But they want to be 80% electric by 2030. Which in automotive means tomorrow.
Right.
So we're supporting them in that transition with some of these software services. And so one of the things that they're lacking in is just understanding when batteries fail. And when they sell someone a vehicle, the OEM is actually responsible for the battery to a certain capacity for 8 years of time. And so, what we wanted to do is go in and take insights from the vehicle, and we now work with 200 insights on the Taycan to understand when a battery could fail and actually help Porsche direct a customer towards a repair solution instead of a failure, because that's much less expensive. So we're not disrupting the current workflow, but I almost think about it as like intelligence augmentation instead of AI.
But that is like the buzzword right now, is like augmentation, right?
I think that's right. And I think we have the pleasure of being able to do some of these things early because we have a 3-year cycle. So we can collect data in a very difficult space for 2 years and then build the business in year 3. So there's a little bit of a portfolio strategy here too. And for the airline we're working with, I found out a terabyte of data comes off of an aircraft every flight. Wow. Which is insane.
Okay. And is it useful? I mean, is it interesting?
Still learning about that. Yeah. So our engineering team is going to start that collection process.
Fascinating.
Yeah. But tremendous amounts of data in that space.
Let's keep going. I find all of these really interesting. Do you have early thoughts on like what's going on with airlines that might be interesting problem areas?
We do. One is the maintenance space. And actually, this is true in automotive. And I'll pivot back over to automotive real quick because I want to tell you about one more thing we're doing there before we move into airlines. But one of the other spaces that just fascinates me is the repair and maintenance space more holistically. It's a $2 trillion market. And the need for repairs is like exponential because cars are older. People are keeping them longer. There are software problems with cars now. And so you have this group of people who are most suited for oil changes and tire rotations that are now trying to reconnect sensors to a windshield. And so it's very challenging to train people, bring them into the space. And so we're developing a platform that takes all the error codes and starts to map those to histories, but then also histories on that specific vehicle so that these individuals can make these changes and repairs much more quickly. So that's one I'm really excited about. That's one we're launching this fall. And then, back to airlines, I think certainly.
Okay,
yes.
So you're launching that company.
Yes.
And also $2 trillion.
Yes. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing. And like customer satisfaction scores have honestly tanked in recent years because the time to a fix has doubled. And some of that is because base space is not available. But a lot of it is because you have a car sitting there that has a software problem. It's taking up space in a bay. And you can't do the oil change, which is super high margin for you.
It's fascinating that the turnaround time has doubled in recent years.
Insane. And it was funny because I looked at like Reddit message boards and people are trying to do fixes on their own. And you don't want that either. You want people to know that they can come in and there's reliability around that fix. But I think that's, certainly a space where we can help dealers provide a better experience, particularly around EV sales, which is one of the weakest parts of the experience today.
And so you said, and that's just been fascinating. Like, so the whole EV thing, it has swept all the manufacturers.
Yes.
Is it regulation that has mostly driven that?
It is. The regulation is so stringent at this point, you really need to produce EVs for carbon footprint purposes. And it's also, to some extent, the consumer in certain markets are driving it. It's seen as luxury in California. So it's a few different things that are happening at once.
It's an interesting market. Obviously, I'm fascinated. Also on automotive supply chain, and maybe that's true of airline too. I'm not sure.
It is. So in automotive, it's even more important because we're working with an OEM that's building the car, and Porsche's typically about 30,000 parts, which is nuts. And so what's happened in that space is actually really fascinating. It's sort of a business school case study where these automotive companies have so many suppliers now, and they've been working with them and optimizing them for 3 or 4 decades and saying, no, this is your profit margin, supplier X. And unfortunately, the suppliers have not had the bargaining power and they've had to sort of listen to that. And so their businesses are very fragile. And many of our macro events in recent years tested that fragility in a way that really hurt the automotive companies. And so in my opinion, a lot of what needs to happen in that space is there's been a value shift up towards the automotive companies who took so much of the profit margin back into themselves, and they now need to shift that back towards the supplier space. And then in addition, you have software and services that can run underneath the space that provide visibility. So one of the most frustrating use cases for Porsche is automotive goes down to like tier 7. I mean, nutty. That's where your raw materials sit. And so
tier 7, explain the different tiers.
So each tier basically provides a good or a material up to the next tier until you get to the OEM. And so it's really precarious because if there's a delay at any point in this chain, the rest of the chain breaks. And what's been really frustrating for automotive OEMs is that they might be working with a tier 1 and there's a delay at the tier 4, let's say. And so that's known right now, but nobody past the tier 4 knows that yet. And so by the time the OEM needs the part or the system from the tier 1, it's really delayed. And they're like, why didn't we know that beforehand? And so we've looked at how do you align incentives and provide that visibility. And that is a really hard problem. It might take us another year to figure out how to get involved.
It's a fascinating conversation. Like I will come back to like the model, but like
yeah, of course.
Do you think about manufacturing as well, and just like so much around onshoring, nearshoring, and where the U.S. is on manufacturing? And
yes, so there's been more vertical integration, and that's been Tesla's play. I think it's really hard for other OEMs to do that at this stage, and I'd actually rather see them use software and better communication and kind of better legal and economic structures to do it. Because I'd love to see them focus more on like EVs and services around EVs and really cool automotive design. That's their core competency now. And that's actually another, interesting trend that we're seeing in the industry is cars are becoming software.
Right.
And so really the commodities are at the supplier level. So I wouldn't recommend going back and trying to insource that. It's more about how do I become a software company? Tesla's doing it all, but they had the benefit of being an EV native company and building their tech stack in the past decades.
Interesting. So you're not focused, from an OEM perspective, you're not focused on manufacturing. You're thinking about, how do I use software to coordinate my ecosystem? And how does the OEM become a software company?
That's where the margin is going to be and the differentiation. And I think many OEMs they're still going to assemble. They're essentially assembling parts and systems that are coming from the suppliers in many ways.
So interesting. Okay. I mean, just the deep dive on automotive helps me understand the UP.Labs model, but we touched on airlines. Are there other, themes outside of automotive that you anticipate tackling or are tackling?
Definitely. I mean, we think about ourselves more holistically as the physical world. So yes, moving world is a big piece of that. But one of the things that I find interesting is we would like to build about 60 companies. And so at some point we start to cannibalize ourselves if we stay squarely in mobility. And so we will need to think about some of these adjacencies around retail. Aerospace and defense is something that we're really interested in as well. I think grocery is super fascinating from a supply chain standpoint. So I'd love to be in that space.
Yeah. So double click on that. So it's a supply chain question again?
Yes, exactly. Network optimization in the retail space, going in, understanding freshness inside the store. There are already some companies that are in this space. So there will be a whole new set of ideas by the time we get around to working with grocery. But those are some of the things that I think about in that space. And then in aerospace and defense, of course, you still have supply chain and manufacturing and factory floor and moving towards being more of a software-minded company. So a lot of the same trends that we're seeing. And what's been interesting for me even to date, and this is part of why I say we're going to cannibalize ourselves at some point, is even just in the few days with the airline, I'm seeing a lot of the same themes.
I mean, how do you find the companies? Find the right person to talk to, build that relation. You're no longer at BCG.
That's right. Yes. And it's a lot scrappier. And so I'm going through that process now because we did come in with a lot of existing contacts, and the UP ecosystem is phenomenal for this. So this is where the UP partners team, Adam and Cyrus and Ben, and obviously my business partner, John, really come in because they have phenomenal Rolodexes. And, the UP team hosts the summit each year, which is an invite-only event around mobility. And I was floored at the people who were at the event last year. So we definitely have conversations with those folks, but we're also more proactively looking at what are the amazing companies that we would want to work with on a company by company basis. And so it's a lot of hitting the pavement and going to conferences. I was just at Milken, and we go to several conferences where there are CVCs. And so we're still very small and young, but we're excited. I think just being attached to the broader UP ecosystem has helped us tremendously.
How did UP build those relationships?
This is also a good question. So Cyrus had founded the largest private jet company in the world. And so he was working with a lot of, high net worth individuals and family offices and corporations as well. And so built many of those relationships very, very early in his career. And there's so much excitement. Folks that love this space, that are total junkies around flight and space. And so they built it up that way through interest and passion.
And so you said you run into a lot of the CVCs. What's your take on CVCs?
Okay, I'm an and person, not an or person.
Of course.
And I think that when it comes to a Fortune 500 company, for example, you're going to do it all. There's no way that I would walk into a Fortune 500 company and say, shut your CVC down and work with UP.Labs. But I think that in many ways, they provide a valuable look around the corner at trends and understanding where industries are heading in and around that corporation where there's disruption. And, I know at Porsche, they've made a number of really good investments. Some of those investments, though, haven't been as close to the core. And so that's where I would go back to this difference between market value and strategic value. And where I still think the most value lies is in strategic value and solving a problem.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because to some degree, if you're being a good venture investor at a CVC, you're making good investments that aren't necessarily core.
Correct.
But what you're talking about when you come in and map all the problems, to me, it sounds like a thing a good consultant could do at the beginning of an engagement.
At the very beginning, I think that's right. But that's over within 4 weeks.
Oh.
So we're very fast at that. So our cycle that first year, we have to get to those problems lightning fast. So I'm not there to tell them, hey, let me diagnose your business, and now I'm going to tell you where there are problems. It's less that and more, let me tell you about solutions now to solve things that you're struggling with. and here's the value those solutions can generate.
Right. Okay. BCG seemed to get it earlier maybe than some of the McKinsey. What was going on there? You had the inside front row seat.
Yes, I was at Bain & Company before BCG, and I was doing digital and social media strategy there. And I agree. I think that they stayed more in the strategy realm. My feeling was my clients' lunch was getting eaten, and I was giving them slides. So that wasn't very interesting to me. So I think that what attracted me to Digital Ventures, and I joined very early in 2014 when we were probably 50 people. We grew to 1,100 people.
Wow.
Yes, but we were building. And that's where I go back to look at the titles of the people who are there. They're building companies. And so that was an important distinction. And I think BCG did get that very early on. And really, in many ways, we did for BCG what we were doing for Fortune 500 companies, which is we digitized them. And so their digital revenue, the fees that they were generating, because that's their core business, was in the teens when we started. And I believe it's now probably 70, 80%. I mean, it's exorbitant. So they're doing tons of work in the digital space.
But does BCG Digital Ventures, it doesn't still exist in the same form?
No, it's integrated back into BCG. That's as of a few months ago. And so they're still doing a lot of the same work, but it's inside of BCG at this point in time. And I think that's also why, we exist in many ways, is a lot of the people on our team are ex-BCG, and we wanted a different model, and we did not want to work fee for service. We wanted an equity model.
And you and John are sort of the founding, John's the CEO, you're the president, and you were
That's
both
exactly
BCG
right.
Digital Ventures.
Yes. So my business partner, John, left Digital Ventures a couple years before me, and he met Ben and Cyrus at the summit. And so they started noodling on what this model can be. And John is phenomenal when it comes to financial structuring, just genius level. And then I joined the founding team last January with about 6 other people.
And who is that usually the champion? I know it's still kind of early, but like within a Porsche, like who's the let's do this in partnership and do this new venture lab model?
Yes. John had connected with Porsche's CVC. And so on the Porsche side, it's definitely the CVC. And they see this as another vehicle for them because it's still making investments, but this time they get to be relevant to the core business. So it's a great value proposition for a CVC. Now, on the airline side, we came in more through the strategy team and through the executive team and, had some ties through John to the airline. But so he's also phenomenal at really going in and helping corporations understand how they might want to change.
Do outside investors, so Up Partners invests,
Correct.
and Porsche's CVC is investing. Do you ever have like a Series A fund investing?
Not right now. So here's the way that I think about it is, I told you the happy path is we want a company to become a $100 million company. So it serves Porsche or the corporate partner first, and then a set of other corporations or customers in that space get to a certain ARR and then ultimately be acquired by the corporate partner for around $100 million. That's what we say. There's a range there. And so we actually can get there with the seed funding from Up Partners and the ARR. And that's what's unique about our model is we're very quick to value.
It's very unique.
Yes.
So that's a great overview, but I'm trying to get a sense of like how you got here. I imagine you think of yourself as a founder more than a consultant or something, right?
That's exactly right.
Even though
I'm more of an operator.
LinkedIn,
yes.
You glance at LinkedIn and you were at Bain, you were at BCG, I think consultant.
That's right.
What did your parents do in high school? Where were you?
I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky on a farm, actually.
Oh,
so
my
I love
gosh.
horses. I love animals. My dad is a real estate developer. My mom stayed at home with my brother and me. And I actually went to boarding school when I was 15. So I went to Massachusetts, Boston area, stayed there for undergrad as well, went to Harvard. I was in a human cloning lab during undergrad, molecular biology major, yes. And then I did a visual arts minor. And so I've always been this very left-brained, right-brained person. And I think that that's helped me quite a bit in the space that I'm in now because like you said, I do consider myself a founder and an operator and a creator, really kind of an inventor. I think of my team, we're inventors. We're coming up with ideas and we're working with people. And I love working with big companies. I love complex organizations and their dynamics. But yeah, my parents are still back in Kentucky, between Kentucky and Florida.
What do you think made you successful? Like, what are some of your, like, you're sharp, you're ambitious. Like, what are the things that you stand out?
It's a good question. I think I'm very experimental. I'm very curious. I love to ask questions. I'm kind of that investigator personality type. And I'm a perfectionist. So nothing is really ever good enough. And that's a double-edged sword, of course. But I think that drove me a lot as a teenager out of Kentucky into this new environment. And then I'm a junkie for arts and culture. I love beauty. So anything that's beautiful. I paint. I love being out in nature.
And what is for you, you're a junkie for beauty. What does that mean to you?
The elegance and simplicity of something that really speaks to me. It could be fashion. It could be a painting, a masterpiece. I think about it as a great masterpiece.
I have so many thoughts on that, but I believe you have to have a good eye, though. I think you can only judge down is what I say, not up.
I think you're right. I would say one of my strong points is that I do have a lot of taste. I enjoy that. I enjoy cultivating that. I'm also very lucky to have gone to the educational institutions that I did.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's a lot of it is you cultivate taste because you're around other people who have it and they teach you about things and you like some of it and you don't like some of it. And that's what helps you cultivate what you do and do not like. I also know very well on a given day, like what I want to eat, where I want to be, who I want to be, what I want to wear. So that's also a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Interesting. And like you walked in like a kind of I need a picture, like a cowboy hat and like a fringy jean, sparkling cutoff jean jacket.
It's from the 90s, actually.
That's awesome. You woke up and you're like, I'm going to be a sparkly cowboy today.
That's exactly right. I thought about you and that I was going to be here and my flight was delayed last night and I was underslept and I was like, this is going to make me really happy. I know exactly what I want to wear today.
I love it.
That happens most mornings.
That's so good. It's been fascinating getting to know you and getting to know this model. It's really interesting.
Thank you.
And you're such a company builder. I love it.
It's been a blast, and it really is a team effort.
Well, thanks for coming on the pod and telling me about it.
My pleasure.